We will have, the next speaker will speak about finding a European way for a cyber world integrating our continent's millenary values. Let's give a round of applause for Laurent.
Thanks a lot. So before we fix some technical problems, just a short introduction. I'm archaeologists, have nothing to do here, theoretically. Since I'm managing since a lot of time cybersecurity issues to implement in Romania public-private dialogue platform and working in several think tanks with bringing sociological and anthropological experience, this will be a talk much more about our values. Every country, every continent has its own values, and they are not perforce compatible. Now, the main challenge we can face today is in fact the philosophy according to which a state is gestioning its own traditional values. The main problem is that we were speaking a lot, this typical abbreviation of what Kant says, we are looking for facts and not truth, and that's valid not only for archaeology, that's valid of course for everything. If it's truth that you want, go to a philosophy class or to a church. The main problem that is actually killing Europe is that we are still in the Kantian revolution. The Kantian revolution presupposes that you need to understand everything to get a solution, and if you don't, it's pure speculation. While our real European values that are not the Russian, not the American, not the Chinese values, they are completely different. Our roots leave a good part to interpretation, and in cybersecurity, this interpretation would allow us to fluctuate. Here in Romania, for example, we had one of the pioneer lawyers, Mircea Juvara, who introduced the capacity of the judges to interpret and have a more or less flexible law. That was, of course, in the end of the 19th century, beginning of the 20s, and of course, after the two world conflicts, we came back again to a very Kantian system of laws. Now, what does it mean practically? That practically to make a thought or to make a decision, you must know everything that is concerning the problem, and then you have the solution. Well, making everything, so knowing everything that concerns the problem in something so fluctuating as cybersecurity is absolutely impossible. So, and for Aristotle, and that's quite interesting, the deliberation is just what is correct according to your moral values, and you can obtain a result with that. I hope it will not turn off. Okay. What's the most important thing in this is it totally fits the democracy in the way we think it in Europe. I'm absolutely not even disappointed. I'm totally angry of witnessing day after day such an usurpation of the word democracy. Yeah, we will build a democracy in Iraq. Yes, we are the most democratic country in the world. Bullshit. The democracy was born in Athens. It was more or less reinterpreted in a strong state way in Rome, and then it was reborn in Europe with the Lumiere period. All the others just copied it in their own interest, and we will see here what it does. Our main problem, what is typically a Kantian reasonment, World War I. Our enemy has this front, he has 1 million people, we put 1.5 million people against in the same front line and let them butcher together. And that's okay. I resolve my enemy, and if half of my troops dies, it's okay. Another typically Kantian, how the German Nazis progressed with the tanks. Instead of inventing something else, we just tried to build better tanks. The Soviets succeeded with T-34. The Americans succeeded more or less in the same time with the Sherman. But again, with 3 years of delay and 3 years of a lot of death, because instead of buying or building a good anti-tank solution, they tried to fight a tank with a tank. What was Aristotelian in exchange? It's typically the way the Romans did. and mainly when they had to face so many different enemies. For example, in the zone we are here in former Dacia, Malvensis, or even on the other side of the Carpathians, in Dacia Porolicensis, they had to face Germanic tribes. And these Germanic tribes had a weakness. Their weakness were the infantry, and they have a very, very strong point that was the hard cavalry. And the hard cavalry was impossible to contain with the way the Romans had their own cavalry organized. So what did they do, and what should we do in Europe, is that they conjugated the talents they had in their own empire, citizens of the empire. So the stele you can see there, it was found in Karansebes. It bears the names of actually there are three steles, of Palmyrenian archers that had their own temple, their own garrison in Karansebes. And why they were there? Because they were the best mounted archers in the world, and with that they defeated the Marcomanns. In the same zone of Sermizegetusa and Tibiscum near Karansebes, we had also Iberians that were founders, so stone throwers, and we had also the Punic, so the Tunisian mounted javelot launchers. And with that they stayed 100 years, they succeeded to secure the border. In the contrary, and that's very similar to what's happening now, Attila was not born from nothing. Attila was hostage in between, you must take the word as it was, because he was a son of one of the Hunnic kings. So it means that all his youth he benefited of the best professors and the best accommodation in Constantinople. So he knew perfectly how the Roman Empire worked, and that was the key of his success when he made the razzia that never created an empire, because his tribe was a nomadic tribe, and their goal was not to create an empire. But that's what we're witnessing now. We are witnessing that internet and the cyber problems, which were basically an American creation, can be used by anybody that is simply learned to use the net. So everybody can use cyber conflict or cyber crime, following the techniques, but in a very different way, according to the way he was educated in his own country. Now, we have a deep problem now in Europe, and that's our main focus points when we witness how useless are our laws, mainly for social media and problems derivating from that, is that we still have the tendency to compare the human rights made by the French Revolution, which is internationally adopted, with the Bill of Rights, which is the American way to interpret and shorten it. Bill of Rights is just a derivation at the beginning of the famous role of Cyrus, who was king of Persia in the 6th century. That was the first right to guarantee to everybody freedom of religion, freedom of work, no slavery, and freedom of choosing the place where one wants to live. And of course, the US Bill of Rights was a wonderful performance in the time it was redacted. But now it caused a lot of problems. All what is illegal by us is legal in the US soil and then in the US gestioned internet, because the Article 1 is freedom of expression. So how do we fight that? Well, the Americans found a very fine way, typically Kantian. I have Al-Qaeda master in my own soil. He's free to express his own ideas. He's free to praise jihad. So I gave to the NSA powers to spy him. Well, that's not very democratic. Turkish way is black screen, simple. Erdogan even declared recently he wants to ban out Twitter from Turkey, and that's a lot of websites you cannot enter, even to The Guardian, to Liberation. If you are in Turkish, you have a very nice display, forbidden access due to the decision of Tribunal of Ankara. Okay, that's another possibility, but that also has nothing to do with our European values. Russia is much more complicated. They have a chess-style very well implemented system of security. That is the SORM. SORM is some devices that are compulsory for the providers, furnished by KGB, and KGB decides what to do with this information, but everything is state centralized. There's no way to provide this information or to subtreat this SORM to third parties. And at least typically Russian, they have a face. And the face is this guy. You can see in how many different fields he worked. And he is responsible also for the public-private dialogue. So it's a typical Russian chess style. The Russian Empire played it, the Soviets played it, Putin is now playing it. It's not our democratic way. China is even simpler. For inner China, that's when a site went too far. For reasons known to everyone and to suppress our extremely unharmonious thoughts, the site is voluntarily closed for 3 days. It means 3 days you have all Chinese KGB to clean it up and to tell them how their redactional way has to. And then with, of course, the hundreds of thousands of people paid for deleting, they can make exact censorship, not like Turkey just to ban all the whole website of The Guardian. They just ban the pages that concern China. That means a lot of men working on this issue. Now, what's our problem? One part of these problems, you can just read them each 6 months on the official website of the Swiss Confederation, which is Melanie, which is one of the most neutral. And our main problem actually is what will do Microsoft, because they are asked for from a small US court to give them all the data from one client of them, which are stocked in Dublin. If they do that, we have to expel Microsoft from Europe, because it's simply a violation of all European laws, these data being stocked in Ireland. Now we will see what will be their answer. They are trying to ensure that they will not do it. We will see. And the other thing that was a real first impact, but only a strong democracy as Switzerland could implement that so quickly, after Snowden we changed everything. It's absolutely out of question that the Swiss federal government continues to implement American materials. Point. End of the game. And that is not only, as you can see, not only for the militaries, but mainly for fixed telephony, for mobile, for computers and for networks that are in our country. In the same time, all the main multinational, Nestlé, Novartis, if we speak pharmaceuticals, agroalimenter, they hired the famous Antonovs that can bring 20 tanks, and they brought 200 tons of servers from Seattle to Basel. End of the game there also. So now, if we started to looking about real issues, the best issues, paradoxically, are from America, because America is extremely reactive, even if too Kantian. If we follow the European rules, knowing what we have to expect with Internet of Things, we will find ourselves with that. That's the necessary toolkit for entering France for a UK citizen. That you need to have in your car, from the Alcotest to the first help, to everything that you need to have. Will we have that by European law in our mobiles? No, I hope not. Well, an amazing capacity of Americans is to enter with new terms. And one of these new terms was in Rockefeller Act. And this is very important because it was issued in the same time that the EU Cyber Strategy Act. They are the first that put into law the term interdisciplinary. We totally lack of that, and that could be our strengths and our deep strengths against any other economic or political force in the world if we succeed to unite the 28 European countries. Because what does it mean? We are even not reaching interdisciplinary, or transdisciplinary, so we don't understand the problem. The Americans really fixed who will parameter that, the National Science Foundation, with the help of NSA, CIA, so on, and with the public-private dialogue platform. And here we still are too fragmented to do it. The problem, basic problem that Americans understood, and they are really paying some of my colleagues, for example, of archaeology, to interact with informaticians, in that the informatics as mathematics, they are the less interconnected disciplines. If you can see who is publishing in the other part, who from inexact sciences like history, archaeology is publishing in exact sciences, you can see all these pyramids that culminated with anthropology and human geography. On the other side, almost nobody from them is publicating in our publications. So we have a strong gap. And if we look at the cybersecurity of the European Union, well, the only word is facepalm, because if you just see the phrases quoted by Catherine Ashton's declaration, it's just, okay, we would have to do that. Who? Europol, EC3, CERT, ENISA? No. We would have to encourage public-private partnership. Who we? Nobody. So another time, one of the maybe best examples, and it's used only by European presidents in case of something that is not they don't want to assume political responsibility, it's referendum. You know that, for example, in France, they just use it because they don't want the European Constitution. Chirac didn't want to say openly, I'm against. So they made a referendum. But that's the only cases when they use real democracy in Italy, in France, in Spain, and so on. We use it almost each 3 weeks, sometimes with catastrophic effects. That was a very racist propaganda on the left of the Swiss right parties to expel foreigners, that foreigners are the black sheep. The problem is that the Swiss citizens voted for an extended delay of assimilating foreign workers, and that excluded us immediately from all the Erasmus programs. But at least it was a popular, I mean, people went to vote, and that's the majority who decided it. What is much more interesting there is that next year we will vote on that. It's an initiative that comes from a young parliamentary that told we have the right to choose if we buy a frigo, if we buy a car, if it's Wi-Fi connected or not. And if not, they will have to take out any kind of Internet of Things device from my fridge. Mainly due after the famous American case that was quoted even by the CIA headquarters of hunting a Frigidaire somewhere in an American state that was sending 60,000 spams per minute. So at least we will vote. And I think this is the real way Europe could go forward in the problems which are actually ours in the field of cybersecurity. More interaction between the countries, more interaction between the disciplines, and at the end, a final vote. Because you were speaking, the previous speaker spoke a lot about SCADA. The main problem is not SCADA. The main problem is even not internet security, because we learned through history that there will always be somebody that has the means to spy you. That's with democracy, freedom, hidden IPs is just bullshit. It just depends how dangerous you are, because if you become too dangerous, even with hidden IPs or anything, you just will be spied as good as you were spied in antiquity or in the last century. The second problem is that we have witnessed with Swiss banks or with problem of industrial spying with Swiss watches. It's much easier to give 3 million bribe to an employee, what the German lender made a lot of times with our Swiss banks to get the list of who is making fiscal evasion, than to enter the SCADA of the Credit Suisse. Useless. I just bribe the guy. And that's a little bit what we supposed to know about how the Stuxnet virus worked in Iran. They had to have somebody inside. So the insider is much, much, much more dangerous than any kind of external attack. That doesn't diminish the SCADA attacks, but the SCADA attacks is what happened, for example, before the Georgian war. And this was also due to a very, very bad Georgian infrastructure, how they implemented the intranet, the extranet, and the critical infrastructure network. Of course, if we have a war, the first wave of this war will be against the critical infrastructures. But I doubt a group of hackers, which is not extremely well financed, will make a massive SCADA attack. The problem is inside, and the problem is in Europe for each one of us to reflect which kind of data we put on the net, on which sites, and how. And of course, now the main difference between the generation which is born now, which is majority here, and my generation is that we were not born with that. So we are much more cautious when we put a photo or a text on Facebook. The young generation had tendency to put everything. And everything starts from the final user. That's the deal, and that's the only way, by the knowledge of the final user, we will find a European solution in respect to our traditions. Thank you very much.